Hi, this is David Miller, and I'm here with the third of 7 mini-lectures on Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. This is also the first of a subset of 4 of these mini-lectures that focus in a lot of detail on a formal analysis of Shakespeare's comic prose. Today's mini-lecture is called The Verbal Dance. In the Norton introduction to Much Ado About Nothing, our editor Stephen Greenblatt comments on the passage where Benedick seethes in comic outrage after having been abused by Beatrice, not to his face, since they're at a masked ball, but to his mask. She pretended not to know it was him. She told me, not thinking that I had been myself, that I was the prince's jester, that I was duller than a great thaw, huddling jest upon jest with such impossible conveyance upon me that I stood like a man at a mark with a whole army shooting at me. She speaks poniards, and every word stabs. If her breath were as terrible as her terminations, there were no living near her. She would infect to the North Star. I would not marry her, though she were endowed with all that Adam had left him before he transgressed. She would have made Hercules turn to spit, yea, and have cleft his club to make the fire, too. Greenblatt points to formal aspects of the passage, the rapid movement of the style, its fantastic piling up of extravagant, inventive images, and sees in these the key to its dramatic effectiveness. The speech conveys Benedick's particular mixture of emotion, including hurt feelings, indignation, and resentment, together with the irresistible impulse to convert those injuries into a witty performance. This performance, especially in its style, acts out the exhibitionist impulse and so confirms the original accusation against him. Benedick really is the prince's jester. This is a good example of how Shakespeare's comic style works as an element of character, especially for the play's older, more articulate, and perhaps not coincidentally more reluctant couple. Suppose we take a closer look at how this happens, a closer look at the borderline between style and character. On the first night after Don Pedro arrives with his retinue, Leonato welcomes them with a banquet and a masked ball. In the opening scene of Act 2, as he enters with his family to commence the masquerade, Leonato is already jesting with Beatrice, by turns scolding and provoking her, feeding her straight lines, and then warning her to watch her tongue. Such conversation is a kind of verbal dance, and like the ball itself, it entails an elaborate game of masks. You might think of this as a game of peekaboo for grown-ups. The unpredictable twist allowed into this game is the element of hostility. The play concentrates a cartoon image, a snidely whiplash portrait of sheer malice in the figure of Don John, the bastard. I think it's funny to call him that. I always like to say, Don John, the bastard, because even though you're just repeating a genealogical term that designates his status with respect to the patriarchal household, you're also flourishing a choice epithet. A classic bit of comically melodramatic American English. He did what? Why, the bastard! But part of the reason it's so easy to have this kind of fun with Don John is that he isn't really threatening. He doesn't threaten Hero for long, and he poses no threat ever to a naive sense of human nature. So we shouldn't take him too seriously. You may recall near the end of the first video, I quoted our editor Stephen Greenblatt, who observes that the play tempts us with the illusion that evil manifests itself as Don John, that is, in a supremely incompetent and finally impotent form, and that it may be exposed by an idiot like Dogberry. Those are comforting comic illusions. But suppose we ask what Don John might be there to distract us from seeing. Could it perhaps be the social force of hostility in its more effectively masked forms? From its opening lines, the play has set up combat as the dominant metaphor for repartee, as when Leonato describes the merry war between Beatrice and Benedick, waged via skirmishes of wit. The pretense of this game is that it's always all in fun, but in fact it may release hostility, and this is surely part of its purpose. If you're not Don John, How do you, in this social world, deal with your frustrations, resentments, and antagonisms? You turn them into a witty performance, as Greenblatt says Benedict is doing. By turning them into play, you take some of the sting out of them, although the example of Benedict also illustrates how much sting may still remain. Antagonism, with its power to wound, may be lurking between the lines of almost any speech. For example, when Beatrice teases her shyer, less gifted young cousin at the ball, we may wonder how Hero feels about the audacious display of singularity her cousin gets away with, all the while reminding Hero that she must submit. "Yes, faith, it is my cousin's duty to make curtsy and say, 'Father, as it please you.'" Is it possible that a young lady, even a young lady of the most amiable disposition, might on some level feel jealous of her older cousin's freedom and resentful when put in her place? If she did, then when this amiable young lady got the opportunity to express her feelings under the guise of playing a joke on Beatrice, might she not take some extra pleasure, over and above the good fun of the joke, in the opportunity to say out loud things like, "To be so odd and from all fashions as Beatrice is cannot be commendable"? And might the pleasure she took in saying such things out loud even be enhanced by the knowledge that they will in all likelihood wound Beatrice? Finally, what if it turned out that by venting her suppressed resentment in this way, Hero actually helped drive her cousin into the matrimonial trap Beatrice makes such a show of disdaining? Hero is headed straight into the predicament her cousin ridicules. Would seeing her cousin married too spoil Hero's pleasure, do you think, or add to it a delicious twist of satisfaction? These are the sort of reflections Don John may tend to distract us from, if we buy into the illusion that the element of malice in the mini-world of Messina is safely quarantined in his person. So let's recognize instead that malice may lurk behind any mask at the ball, and that it may even be the reason masks are necessary. Perhaps the social game of teasing conversation exists principally as a way of deflecting, disguising, or rerouting aggression. Divert malice into play, and you make it less dangerous, though you make play more dangerous in the process. You remove some, though never quite all, of malice's sting. What is left stays on in the sting of witty speech, half love nip and half slap in the face. As the ball begins, so does this game of clever group conversation. Everybody knows the rules and understands, mostly, the various steps. When Beatrice tells Hero that wooing, wedding, and repenting is a Scotch jig, a measure, and a syncopace, she is drawing not only upon their shared social knowledge of dances, but also upon their shared social understanding of speeches like this one, as the verbal equivalents of dance, complete with variations of tempo, a repertoire of half-choreographed, half-improvised maneuvers, and a self-conscious delight in the execution of tricky rhetorical footwork. The real dance in this passage is that of the language, and that awareness is part of the joke. Let's pick up the dialogue at line 48, where Leonardo tells Beatrice he hopes to see her one day fitted with a husband. Stop right there. Fitted how, exactly? First of all, I think, fitted literally as a joiner fits two pieces of wood together. Shakespeare's characters may make a fetish of virginity in aristocratic girls, but their speech is not prudish, and one thing Leonardo implies here is that Beatrice will have a male part installed. But fitted with also applies to the work of a seamstress, so perhaps Leonardo is also suggesting that Beatrice will have a husband hemmed, tucked, and trimmed to suit her. Well, these are first impressions. To check on them, as well as to generate more ideas, I go to the Oxford English Dictionary, where multiple definitions for fit suggest all sorts of relations between husband and wife. How do you choose among so many possibilities? Just grab whatever conforms to your preconception and ignore the rest? maybe not. One thing to notice is that different definitions apply only to certain usages. Most definitions of fit don't, as a matter of fact, fit. The combination fitted with. The exception is definition 11a, to supply, furnish, or provide with what is fit, suitable, convenient, or necessary. Interestingly, the first quotation illustrating this definition comes from Shakespeare. Early in Two Gentlemen of Verona, Julia asks her maid Lucetta to help disguise her as a boy. "Gentle Lucetta, fit me with such weeds as may beseem some well-reputed page." Here, fit refers not just to the garment, but also, by extension, to the illusion the garment will foster, the illusion that a young woman has been supplied, furnished, or provided with what is fit, suitable, convenient, or necessary to a young man. In Much Ado, then, when Leonato echoes Julia's phrasing, his language may imply that Benedick will be cut to fit Beatrice like a dress, but it also implies that husbands are necessary to single females who are not properly outfitted until they marry. Now, I can't prove by pointing to the text alone what Leonato may be thinking at this moment, but an actor playing the part or a director directing that actor will have to decide. In my imaginary production, Leonato offers his wish in a tone of amused expectation. He knows he is feeding Beatrice a straight line, one of her old favorites, and so does she, and so does everyone else. That's the nature of the game. Ordinary conversation turns into a sustained improvisation of cleverness in which all the participants collaborate. In such an explicitly performative situation, Leonato's comments amount to gentle baiting. In front of Antonio and Hero, he is offering Beatrice a tempting target, an open provocation to one of her customary skirmishes of wit. What I have said about malice, however, means that it can be intriguingly difficult to tell, at dramatic moments like this one, which is the mask and which is the true face. Leonato's words say explicitly that he would like to see Beatrice married. Now, on one level, that might be both sincere and benevolent. Leonato may be conventional enough to assume that marriage is automatically a good thing for his single female relations, and he may be simple enough to wish it upon them out of the goodness of his heart with no further motive. Still, he does know Beatrice, and he must realize that he's feeding her a cue, so beneath the conventional piety of the remark, there surely lurks an invitation to play. Next time, we'll see how Beatrice takes him up on that invitation.